Okay, today we're going to be covering chapter 41 and possibly chapter 42. The first chapter is chapter 41 is the combat veteran. And uh, they're just special little things that we need to look for so we don't, I can't use the word trigger, but how to actually assess information from them and actually take care of them. Okay, so combat veterans comprise about less than 1% of the population, but can actually present unique challenges related to post-traumatic stress disorder, which is PTSD. PTSD can actually affect anyone who has undergone any type of significant trauma, not just veterans, but it's more prevalent on veterans. Okay, the facial expression, often known as the 1,000-yard stare, may actually be a reaction to the abnormal stresses of combat. I thought it was the thousand. I guess it was 1,000. I thought it was like a 1,000 mile thing, but I guess it's yards. Because the stress response is a result for a sympathetic nervous system activity. Epinephrine and norepinephrine are released by the adrenal glands, which remember they are located above the kidneys. The body is prepared for action, and normally the parasympathetic nervous system balances the sympathetic nervous system. So normally the sympathetic nervous system acts and the parasympathetic nervous system counteracts. In PTSD, the central nervous system remains activated without shutting down. And that's the one that gives you your fight or flight. PTSD in combat veterans is different from war era veterans. So combat veterans are the ones that have actually seen or been in a war, while the war era veterans have not, or the opposite, I think. Each veteran has individual issues. Okay, a history of combat services may actually be relevant to the emergency. Your patient is now experiencing a variety of clues can help you identify the patient as a combat veteran, such as a high and tight military haircut. Phrases, phrase your questions carefully. Use where did you see combat instead of did you see combat? Okay, do not ask the veteran if he has actually ever killed somebody. 2/3 have severe relationship problems since their return, and 25% of the homeless are veterans, and 2/3 have PTSD. So it's a pretty large amount. PTSD is a collection of signs and symptoms a patient may actually show. It is a reaction of a normal person to an abnormal situation. There is sustained central nervous system activity, and memories linger and are disruptive to the person. Okay, PTSD 4 essential features. Response can actually involve feeling of anger, fear, horror, and helplessness. Relieving events uh, through the flashbacks, unwanted thoughts, and nightmares, and avoiding anything that reminds him physically or emotionally of the trauma. Anxiety or anger with much time spent in a state of perceived imminent threat. So they're hyped up. Signs and symptoms. They're going to have a feeling of guilt, shame, avoidance of others, depression, paranoia, hostility, feeling that they will not live much longer, and agitation and anger. Associated signs and symptoms of PTSD physical response include pain, which may actually be vague or unfocused, and signs of premature aging. It's going to show up on them. Alcohol and drug abuse resulting heightened central nervous system activity. 40% of veterans engage in pathological use of alcohol and drugs. And they usually have a denial of using these drugs. So denial is very common. Danger is to self or others. Combat veterans are no more likely to be violent towards others than other veterans are. Combat veterans' suicide rate is 30% higher than that of veterans, and predictions of who will be a danger to himself and others is difficult. Signature wounds of combat veterans. In Iraq and Afghanistan, you had the IEDs, which is improvised explosive devices, resulted in amputations and traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury is an alteration of the brain function, such as a result of external force. Now, traumatic brain injury versus post-traumatic stress syndrome. Signs and symptoms. There is an overlap of signs and symptoms. Loss of consciousness is not necessary for diagnosing or diagnosis of traumatic brain injury. Most traumatic brain injuries have been diagnosed, but some may actually been missed. Traumatic brain injury and PTSD can actually coexist. So signs and symptoms of PTSD and convulsions or traumatic brain injury, severe headaches, you got them on both. Drug and alcohol abuse, you got them on both. Sleep disturbance, you got them on both. Depression, you got them on both. Anxiety, you have it on both. Anger, on both. Memory problems, on both. Easily frustrated, on both. Relationship problems, on both. Traumatic events, on both. Easily fatigued, on both. Bothered by certain smells, on both. And automatic actions, on both. Um, let's see, signs and symptoms: severe head or neck pain, on both. I guess this is going to be showing on both. Trouble breathing, on both. Lack of focus, on both. Uh, Clumsiness, can't find the right thought words. Trouble understanding others, getting lost, disoriented. Trouble swallowing. Confusion, trouble hearing, blurred vision, dizziness, and loss of sense of smell. Okay. Traumatic brain injury versus post-traumatic stress syndrome. Signs and symptoms: repeated concussions can actually lead to chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Okay, so chronic traumatic encephalopathy is CTE. Assessing and providing care for the combat veteran. Do not ask the veteran if they have ever killed anyone ever. Provide structure and limits. Remind the patient you are there to help. Use calm, firm approach. If you have not been in combat, do not tell them that you understand, and establish a rapport with them or gain their trust. The patient may actually be reluctant to seek help. Find out what the person wants from the encounter with EMS. Do not assume PTSD, but do not rule it out. And ask about weapons. How many weapons do you have? And are they secure in the house? If you show up to their house. Keep noise down. Uh, do not bang on the door or allow crowds. Respect the patient's space and privacy. Explain what you're going to be doing. Diesel fumes, dust, and helicopters can actually be triggers for these patients. Combat vets have trouble asking for help, and take time to actually listen to the patient. Okay, and that should be it for this chapter. I told you it was gonna be a short chapter. Okay, the next one is gonna be ambulance operations. Let's see, where is it? Okay, let's share this. Okay, ambulance operations and air medical response. Now, with this one, this is something that you guys that have already been working in the ambulance should be a little bit more aware of, because it's basically maintaining your equipment and what is it that you can be doing on calls and whatsoever. Now, the air medical response, it's something that the the local air what do you call it? The local helicopter company that deals with us is going to be teaching us on landing zones or whatsoever. So we'll go over the gist of it. So an ambulance should be a place of comfort and support to patients. EMTs must actually be able to skillfully operate the ambulance. Uh, this chapter describes the elements of creating a culture of safety, CRM, and how to operate the ambulance with safety in mind. I don't even remember what CRM is. Um, just culture based on the fairness of accountability, focus placed on the assessment of risks, have a coordinated support and resources, EMS safety data systems, EMS education initiatives, EMS safety standards, and requirements for reporting and investigating is part of what we're going to be doing. 5-step assertive statement process. Opening or attention getter. State your concerns with the situation based on your analysis. State the problem and state the solution, and obtain your partner's agreement. 5 factors for crew resource management. That's what CRM stands for. Communication, situation awareness, decision making, teamwork, and barriers. Effective use of crew resource management can actually reduce errors in patient care and better protect the safety of the EMS personnel, patients, and the public itself. Laws, laws, regulations, and ordinances apply uh, apply to the operation of ambulances. Actually, certain privileges are afforded to ambulance operators. It is never justified to operate an ambulance unsafely. And there's a lot of things that we kind of get away with, but remember that a it's not a privilege. It's not mandated that we do these things unless we do them safely. Laws and regulations and ordinances. You must actually meet these conditions. You must have a valid driver's license. You must be responding to an emergency. You must use warning devices, emergency lights, horns, and sirens. Uh, you must exercise due regard for safety of others, and many EMS systems provide additional guidances. Now, I know that if you want to really think about it, when you're the attendant and the attendant is the person that's actually taking care of the patient in the back. Your responsibility is to the patient. Simple as that. But when you're the driver, your responsibility is to the patient, your partner, and everybody around that ambulance. So just keep that in mind. Now, driving excellence, basics of good driving: wear seatbelts, hold the steering wheel with both hands, practice with the vehicle you will actually drive, respond to weather and road conditions that present themselves to you. Uh, Basics of good driving: select the best route for safe travel, maintain a safe following distance, use headlights, and exercise caution when using warning devices. Now, there's a number of factors that can actually cause the operator to lose control of the ambulance. A lot of them is road conditions, other drivers. I know the most common ones that I've seen is other drivers getting in the way or crashing into them. And then, of course, road conditions. If the road is slippery, and it depends on what type of unit you're driving. You have to, if you're driving a Type 1 unit, that's kind of low to the ground, kind of wide, so it's kind of hard to, to flip it. But I have seen these ambulances flip like this one. This is looks like a Type 1 or a Type 3. Now the Type 2s, which are the van types, those are very top heavy. So any sudden jerks of the steering wheel can actually cause you to actually fall on your side. Okay. Driving to maintain control. Go the posted speed limit unless the situation is critical. Now, the only thing is that you're allowed to go 10 miles above the speed limit. Not 20, not 30, but 10 miles above the speed limit when you're going code 3. Avoid sudden braking. Minimize distractions. Realize other drivers may actually be distracted. And the way the cars are built right now, you can't hear anything from the outside until the ambulance is right on top of them. Maintaining control, higher speeds, be especially careful on curbs. Brake to the proper speed before you enter a curve. Accelerate carefully and gradually. Exit from a curve slowly and steady, using a down a long hill, and use a lower gear. Always use a smooth braking motion instead of just slamming on the brakes. Maintain control. Aggressive drivers driving an ambulance does not necessarily change the habits of the drivers, of other drivers. Aggressive drivers are often distracted. Use the police or other emergency vehicle escorts en route to the response or to the hospital should be last resort. Maintain control. Intersection collisions. The most common collisions in which ambulances are involved are those at the intersections. And I've seen even fire trucks T-boning somebody because the other person got in the way. And driving in inclement weather, raining or wet weather, an ambulance requires twice the stopping distance. Remember, it's a very heavy vehicle, especially on wet pavement, and 5 times as much on the sleet or ice. Maintain a safe following distance. Driving in inclement weather and winter driving, carry emergency weather equipment, use studded snow tires, monitor the temperature when ice and freezing rain occur between 28 degrees and 40 degrees. Remember, and I know that I found this out by mistake. I remember there was one day that I was working in EMS, and it just happened to be like 30 degrees or below that. And we stopped to put gas, turned off the unit, and it would not turn on again because the diesel kind of froze. So And no matter how many times we actually did the glow plugs, it didn't. But somebody showed up with a can of WD-40, they put it inside the intake, and it started like magic. So avoid sudden movements of the steering wheel and sudden braking also. Driving in inclement weather, fog, mist, dust storms, and smog. Slow down, but avoid sudden decelerations. Watch for slow traffic ahead and behind. Turn on low beams and wipers. Use four-way flashers. Use defrosters, and when braking, pump brakes to flash lights, and so they can see you. Now, a lot of these ambulances now, when you press the brake, it kind of like does like a triple. Uh, it's like the the brake light itself does it automatically. It's like if you're tapping on the brake, but it does. You know, I've seen some of these ambulances that do that. Now, driving at night, the risk of fatal collisions is higher. High beams headlights can actually cause temporary blindness. On high beams, visibility will actually be 250 to 400 feet at 55 miles per hour. It takes 4.5 seconds to cover 350 feet. For night driving, control speed, so the stopping range is within headlight range. Take extra care when driving at night. I don't know if you guys have, well, you have noticed this. Cars have been blinding me. I mean, with their low beams, to where I have to look to the side so I don't get blinded by the lights, especially when you're driving, against the traffic. Now, warning devices can actually save time, but have risks. Follow protocols for use of warning devices. Warning devices only request the right of way. They do not actually guarantee it. Exercise due regard when using warning devices. Colors and markings. Colors and markings provide for quick identification of ambulances and make them visible in traffic. Now, colors and markings are typically designed to actually provide quick identification that is the vehicle, what do you call it, is an ambulance, and to minimize visibility of traffic. Now, this one looks like a fire department because it's red. Most fire department ambulances are red. They do have the, what do you call these? Chevrons, I think that's what they're called, in the back that are reflective. So a lot of things in the ambulance should be reflective. Uh, Warning lights and emergency lights. Activate emergency lights during emergency calls. Use headlights even in daylight. Lights are placed at various locations of the ambulance for visibility. White lights are more visible than red and blue. Minimize lighting or lights in fog and when parked. I remember driving once in the fog, and it looked weird. With we had a rotating light on the top, and it just made everything look freaky. Using siren noises is generally reduced inside the vehicles. Do not startle drivers with certain siren noises. Siren noises is stressful for patients, and siren can actually prevent hearing other emergency vehicles that are coming, that are where they're coming the opposite way, or they're coming back at you. Using an air horn, which I love using an air horn, scared the hell out of a lot of people. Consider using the air horn when there is a need to clear traffic quickly. Do not sound the horn when close to other vehicles. Roadway incident and safety. Okay, EMS personnel must set up the safe environment when working on or near the roadway. Poor visibility and impaired distracted Impaired, distracted, and or inexperienced drivers are all factors in roadway accident incident injuries. EMTs and other rescue personnel responding to emergencies on or near the roadway must actually wear approved high visibility apparel, and that's those vests that we have. EMTs must wear apparel that meets Class 2 or Class 3 standards of ANSI and IZEA, and then usually it's the orange reflective vest or yellow reflective vest, depending on which one you get. Safety benchmarks: do not trust approaching traffic. Do not turn your back on traffic. Use the first arriving emergency vehicle to create a barrier between the traffic and the scene. Wear personal protective equipment and ANSI high visibility vest. At night, turn off vision impairing lights, or it's the bright lights that might actually be blinding other cars. Safety benchmarks: use emergency vehicles to slow and redirect traffic. Use warning signs and traffic control measures upstream. From the scene itself. Use traffic cones to divert traffic. Use a person monitor traffic. Place vehicles uphill, upwind, and when hazardous materials may actually be involved. Major phases of a call. Basically, you have a daily vehicle and equipment and preparation, or you need to check your unit to make sure everything is there. Not only that, that all the fluids are okay, uh, and that there's no wear and tear on the tires or whatever. Then dispatch en route to the scene, at the scene, en route to the receiving facility, at the receiving facility, en route to the station, and post run. And those are basically the steps of a call. Basic ambulance maintenance includes oil and filter changes, transmission and differential checks, wheel bearing checks, brake checks, and tie rod end inspection. And know your service policies and procedures for supporting and correcting vehicle problems. Now, a lot of the companies around the area have their own mechanics. The only thing is that a mechanic is not gonna constantly be checking the ambulance. They're gonna be checking the ambulance when you notice that there's something wrong. So the responsibility still falls on you. Okay. Daily pre-run vehicle preparation. This includes checking the vehicle and ensuring all supplies and equipment are present and in working order. Okay. Items typically include in the daily ambulance inspection includes fuel, oil, fluid circulation system, batteries, brakes, tires and wheels, shoreline power connectors, and headlights. Now I've seen ambulances as driving without a headlight, which I mean they shouldn't be driving because hello, they didn't pass your personal inspection. Now brake lights also turn signals, emergency lights, wipers, horns, sirens, windows, door closing and latching devices, and power systems. And we do have a power system that actually runs some of the equipment in the back of the unit. Air conditioning, heating, and ventilation systems, also radiator hoses and fan belts, seat belts, dash lights, radio, supplies, and interior and exterior cleanliness. Check for tire inflation. Make sure that they're all up to par. Now, a lot of the ambulances now, what they do have is they do have a warning sensor that will let you know that the tire is low. But if you don't, you still need to manually check it. Make sure that the lights are functional. Check all belts and hoses. Make sure they're not cracked. Check all fluid levels and keep them up. Medical supplies. You have basic medical supplies, a patient transfer equipment, airways, suction equipment, artificial positive pressure ventilation devices like the BVM, oxygen inhalation equipment, automated external defibrillator, basic wound care supplies, splinting supplies, childbirth supplies, and medications. Non-medical supplies, personal protective equipment, which is for your standard precaution like gloves, goggles, and whatsoever. High visibility safety vests, pre-planned routes, and comprehensive street maps. Dispatch, a message from the communication center will actually start to run. As a dispatcher, to read any information that seems unclear, write this information down so that you can actually refer to it. En route to the scene, check vehicle exterior compartments, fasten your seatbelts, verify dispatch information, listen to for status updates, anticipate equipment needs or needed, drive responsibly and determine crew member scene duties, and request ALS if necessary. At the scene, notify dispatch for arrival, park the most appropriate location, perform a 360-degree scene survey, put on high visibility apparel, which is your vest, take standard precautions. It is safe to actually approach the patient and determine the nature of the problem or mechanism of injury of the call. Now, safety at the scenes. What they have, it just depends on your protocols, but you can be set up to actually park in the right before the accident to use your vehicle as a barrier, or park in front of the accident so you can be out of the way. Okay, park the EMS unit uphill and upwind from any leaking hazardous materials. And this is, I've seen this question a lot in the tests. At the scene, determine the number of patients, determine priorities of care. If needed, gain access to the patient, provide treatment, and move the patient to the ambulance, observing safety precautions. En route to the receiving facility, ensure hazards have been actually controlled, ensure the patient is strapped to the cot. Be surprised how many times I've actually heard that the latch for the stretcher is not latched on and the patient's moving all over in the back. Ensure that the patient is secure. Change the onboard oxygen, or it's from the portable one to the onboard one. That way you don't finish the portable one just in case you need it when you get out to the hospital. Perform a reassessment. And remember, you have the 15-minute rule and you have the 5-minute rule, depending on the patient is stable or unstable. Document your history and other assessment findings. And I think this guy's using the electronic devices to actually do it. I haven't really seen something that small. I've seen the bigger ones that you guys have. Communicate with medical direction and receiving medical facility. Make the patient comfortable and reassure him. Notify dispatch when you're en route and when you actually arrived at the receiving medical facility. At the receiving facility, transfer patient care with all records, personal belongings, and an oral report. Assist in moving the patient. Exchange linen and equipment that may actually be left with your patient, and complete the patient care report. And be ready for the next call. Put all equipment in its proper sections. This right here is what you see is a scoop stretcher. En route to the station or response area, before leaving the hospital, clean and inspect and restock the ambulance. Wash your hands, notify dispatch, refuel if needed, and return to the station that you're actually stationed at. Post-run, fill out and file any reports as required by local protocol. After each run, check fuel. Replace what you used during the run, clean and disinfect non-disposable equipment used, and change soiled uniforms. Or it's a uniform that you're wearing. Make up the, wheeled stretcher and actually lock it into place for the next call. Complete the inventory equipment and supplies, replace necessary equipment so that the ambulance is fully stocked. Clean and disinfect the patient compartment. Post-run infection control procedures, dispose of sharps, wash hands, clean, disinfect, and sterilize contaminated equipment. Now, air medical support. When you request air medical support, operation guidelines, patient transport to a distant facility, prolonged extrication for a high priority patient, air transport will actually save time over ground transport. Remember that when you're dealing with air transport, they don't have lights, they don't have traffic. All they need to do is just take them straight. The patient is in a remote area. Ground ambulances transport is blocked, especially medical skills supplies and equipment are actually available in the air transport. I'm sorry. Medical guidelines when you're dealing with requesting a medical transport: acute stroke, head injury with altered mental status with signs of herniation, changes in abdominal trauma with signs of respiratory distress or shock, serious mechanisms of injury with unstable assessment or vital signs, and unstable patients with penetrating injury. Requesting your medical transport, give your name, department name, callback number, nature of incident, exact location of the incident, your radio frequency, and exact location of landing zone and hazards. You have to set up the landing zone for these places. Additional considerations: weather, environmental limitations. A lot of times the helicopter will not take off because it's raining. Altitude limitations, airspeed limitations, aircraft cabin size, terrain, costs, and patient preparation. Okay, clear when dealing with the landing zone, clear off obstructions, flat free debris, and 150 feet from collision of vehicles. Now, I've seen this question also. Minimum 62 by 60 feet during the day and 100 by 100 at night. This is another question that I've seen in the test. In highways, stop both ways, traffic both ways. Consider the wind direction. Mark each corner with a landing area, and fifth warning devices on the upwind side. Now, the key thing is that a helicopter is going to have to land against the wind. So if we get a Gulf breeze coming in, they have to go north and turn around and land going south. Okay, never go by the tail rotor here because it becomes invisible. Now, I've heard that it kind of hypnotizes people. I didn't know that. But I hear it every now and then. Okay, and remember that the main rotor blades may actually dip because these things will actually dip in all four directions. Approach the helicopter from a downhill direction, because if you come into the uphill direction, you're going to be closer to the blades than you're actually going to be um, if you're coming from the downhill direction. Now, the other thing is that you have to be very careful. The pilot has to clear you to get close to the helicopter. Operation security measures, there are recommended guidelines to avoid the use of emergency vehicles in terrorism attacks and reduce the risk of theft. Personnel conduct security briefings each shift. EMS crews should actually be informed and allowed to actually participate in development of security measures. Now, they actually stolen ambulances and put bombs in them and then they have them explode at the scene. So be very careful with that. Operational security measures. All vehicles must be tracked at all times. EMS vehicles should not be left running or unattended with the keys in the vehicle. Now, I've seen this. I even saw it today in Mission. There was an ambulance outside of the ER and it was on. Tracking vehicle access. Do not, no access by unauthorized personnel. Keep the key log. Security measures to be followed during repairs. All markings must be destroyed if you're going to be selling or getting rid of the ambulance. Safeguard identification cards and patches from unauthorized personnel. Now, I'm sorry, but anybody can go to downtown and buy a paramedic patch, a paramedic uniform. They really don't ask. I know that the only place that asks is the Green Beret on 10th Street. ID cards and badges should be uh, counterfeit resistance and have a photo of the provider. Uniform stores must actually verify the identifications of persons buying uniforms or identification items. Okay, carbon monoxide in ambulances may actually come from the vehicle's exhaust, equipment powered by gasoline or fuel, like if you have a generator in there, exhaust or vehicle marked next to traveling by the ambulance itself, and greater outside air pressure, which actually forces the CO to actually get inside the cabin. Okay. To prevent carbon monoxide poisons, have frequent engine tune-ups, have an adequate exhaust system, keep rear windows shut, make sure doors shut tightly, covering any opening to the outside, and do not use exhaust fans or static vents, and keep the heater on or the AC on so it can actually circulate the air inside. Okay, and that's it for this lesson. So, a few seconds. So, do you want to go ahead? Let me see. Hold, give me a few seconds. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.